Okay, so we're back on the F-250, and thankfully today it isn't raining. I get to smell these wonderful gardenia blooms. This is a Miami Supreme. This is the first time it's bloomed, so thrilled to see that. Smells wonderful. Alright, so next step, since we have the drive shaft back and that's all ready to go, is to replace the pinion seal. To do that, one of the old shade tree tricks is to mark the orientation of the pinion nut so that it can be reassembled the same way. So I'm just going to clean it off with a wire brush so we can get a good paint mark on there. A bit of simple green to degrease it. Scrub that, let it dry. One of the reasons why this is important is because this nut sets the preload on the pinion bearing. So if it's too tight, too much drag on the bearing, if it's too loose, bearing will wear itself out really quickly because there'll be a lot of slop in it. Now technically, according to the manual, you're probably supposed to pull the axle shafts and measure the bearing drag with an inch-pound torque wrench. I'm not going to do that. That's an awful lot of work for not much to gain. Plus, this truck is a lot of miles anyway, and this rear end was leaking fluid for a long time. It's about 2 quarts low. So I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time in this because it's probably near the end of its useful life anyway. Don't tell my father-in-law that. Alright, so we got that nice and clean. We'll let that dry. Let me spray it off with some water and we'll let it dry. Alright, so I'm going to take a little arts and crafts brush and some sealing paint. Goes on pink, dries white. And just mark the orientation of the nut to the pinion. Hey Leo, what's up? How you doing? You hungry? Tell your daddy to feed you. It's our neighbor's cat. He's cool. Good morning. How you doing? Come here. Come here, Leo. Leo, come here. Good morning. How are you? He's a cool cat. I forget what kind of cat you are. I know you're just about the coolest cat in the world. Don't tell my cat. Good morning. Are you hungry? You feel skinny. Tell your daddy he needs to feed you. Alright, let's go do this before the paint dries. I want to make this paint mark as thin as possible. That's why I'm using an arts and crafts brush. So we'll do something about like that. So just mark that orientation just like that. And we'll let that dry. Alright, so we got the 1/2-inch impact gun hooked up with an inch and, I think it's 1 1/8 or 1 1/4. I think it was 1 1/8. Yeah, 1 1/8 impact socket to take off that nut. You can hear the air compressor running in the background. Nice and warm out now. Alright, so we're just going to buzz that nut off. Okay, it's off. And we're going to need to put a puller on that to pull the flange off. So I got my 2-jaw puller. I'm just going to hook that up. Alright, so we got the puller hooked up. Trying to be careful not to disturb my paint mark. We'll just crank on this with a ratchet and pull that flange off. Alright, so we got the puller. We used the puller to pull flange off. This is what it looks like. A good bit of work. And that's the seal we want to replace right there. There's a special tool for removing that seal. And you also want to inspect the surface of the flange. This one actually feels kind of messed up because that seal seals against the flange. Let's look at this. Better lighting. So if you run your finger along that sealing surface, I can feel small ridges in there. I'm actually not sure if this one's okay or not. It doesn't look too bad, but it is definitely not smooth. I'm gonna see what it costs to replace this. Alright, I cleaned up the sealing surface a little bit. It's actually not as bad as I thought. I also texted the owner to see if he wanted to replace it. He said just run with it. So we're gonna yank out the old seal with a seal puller. This is a new one, and it'll just pop into the axle like that. So let's get the puller and yank it out. Oh, and this is what a seal puller looks like. It's just a handle with a hook at the end. You can pick these up at auto parts stores. I'm sure Amazon has them as well. Alright, so I think this one's gonna come out in pieces. You can see I already poked a hole through it. Sometimes they do that. You gotta be prepared for it. So if that happens, we'll just kind of work it out. May have to get a screwdriver and kind of pry out one corner and then collapse the seal on itself. Alright, so I caught the seal just right and it came out. It came out in a clearly non-reusable state. So we broke it. Alright, so now I'm going to clean up that sealing surface inside there, in this area here, just to make sure we don't have any crap or anything that'll cause a leak. You can see now the pinion shaft pretty loose. Nothing holding those bearings in place. That's what that nut that we took off does. Like I mentioned before, that nut sets the preload on those bearings, so we got to be careful there. Alright, so we're going to clean this up. Going to oil up the flange. Gonna put some oil on the seal, and then we're gonna tap the seal in. I was running around trying to find a good seal driver for this. I don't have a socket big enough, but it turns out that an old thermos is almost perfect size. I'm gonna look around a little bit more to see if I can find something that'll fit the outside diameter here a little bit better. And if I don't, I'll just go with that thermos. Alright, so I got the seal in there. I did destroy that thermos mounting it in there, but it worked. I used a block of wood on the back and just tapped it. Make sure that flange seats tightly against the axle housing. Alright, so I buzzed that flange on with the impact gun and then took the nut off again because we're going to replace that nut. And we just got to line up that paint mark as best we can with the new nut. So as luck would have it, I bought the wrong nut. So I'm just going to reuse the one that came off the vehicle. Not ideal, but best we can do under the circumstances. I'm going to use some Loctite Blue 242 on the threads just to make sure this thing doesn't back off by itself. So I got it so the paint marks line up on the nut and on the pinion shaft. Now, to put some preload on the bearings, we're just going to tighten it a tiny smidge past that. So just about like that. Ever so slightly past the original paint mark. Alright, so I got one half of the drive shaft just kind of loosely bolted into place. I'm going to attach the second half of the drive shaft now. And obviously pay attention to your marks here. If you had your drive shaft balanced, they would have been put on by the person that balanced it. Or if you didn't get it balanced, pay attention to your original marks. You don't want to put something in 90 degrees off and create a balance issue. All right, we got the drive shaft back in, both halves. New bolts at the pinion flange. New strap and bolt kit at the center joint. Hello. Fresh coat of paint, rebalanced, the whole 9 yards. So the vehicle should be good to go now. Just got to take it on test drive.